All right, so it's another Sunday morning. Sun is shining, just came up out of the water in front of me here. A treatise on white magic is what we're reading from. If you're in the book itself, I'm on page 106. It is rule 3 for anybody who's got the downloaded one, but we're substantially into rule 3. And I'm going to start on the top of page 106. When the radiant light of the soul is blended with the magnetic light of the vital body, it stimulates the atoms of the physical body to such an extent that each atom becomes, in turn, a tiny radiant center. This only becomes possible when the head, the heart, the solar plexus, and the center at the base of the spine are connected in a peculiar fashion, which is one of the secrets of the first initiation. When these 4 are in close cooperation, the floor of the triangle, as it is symbolically called, is prepared for the magical work. In other words, these can be enumerated as follows. The physical material form with its center at the base of the spine, the vital body working through the heart center, where the life principle has its seat. The activities of the body which are due to the stimulation are carried through the circulation of the blood. The emotional body working through the solar plexus center, and the head center, the direct agent of the soul and its interpreter, the mind. When these 4 are in complete accord and alignment, when this is the case, the work of initiation and its interludes of active discipleship become possible. So again, where we originally said the soul, until you have that, the physical, the emotional, and the mental aligned, so the personality is integrated, the soul hasn't got any time for you because it can't work with you until they're aligned. And this is another way of looking at this, the 4, complete accord and alignment. Then the soul can interact with you, and the work of initiation and its interludes of active discipleship become possible. And one should take a look at that sentence. There's initiation, then there's interludes. Okay, of the active disciple. And so you're always going to have those cycles. If you have a little jump, a little level of awareness, you're going to have that interlude where it settles, where it grounds, where you think, oh my God, that was such a wonderful thing going on there, and I lost it all. And where did it go? And I mean, that's just part of the cycle. So before this time, the work can't proceed. This is foreshadowed in the aspirant when there is a symbolic happening in the light in the head, which is the forerunner of the later stage of initiation. And you can't cheat by putting a coal miner's light on your head and walking around with it and thinking that you're going to fool anybody, because it won't. This is a light coming from within you. In this stage, the soul light penetrates into the region of the pineal gland. And we're getting a lot of discussion now. I don't know if anybody else has heard it, but I have, about the calcification of that pineal gland. Anybody else heard the comments on it lately?
Oh yeah.
It was Wi-Fi supposed to do it, and then the stuff in our toothpaste, and there's one more big one.
Fluoride
Like
was
Yeah, the
right?
water. Yep.
Aluminum oxide, I think, was the third one.
So I've been drinking like high pH balanced water before I go to bed, and so is Lisa. And I'm telling you, I feel different when I wake up in the morning by drinking that before I go to bed.
So what is it, a 9?
9.5.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, which that ought to make you feel great anyway, because it's going to get all of you back kind of in the range that you should, you know, all parts of you, in other words. Yeah, it's healthy to do that, no matter what. And then there's the talk now of the decalcification of the pineal gland. Bull, I don't know if you've paid attention or heard that, but that's also supposedly in the works, coming down the line. So, but so
I'm
at this
ready to,
stage, pardon?
I'm ready to get in the med bed and just have them clean up my pineal gland and then go from there.
Yeah, but I don't even think it was the medved. They're talking about this solar flare that's connected with something. And I think Simon had mentioned something about July. So I don't really know. All I know is words have come out that something in that process would have some effect in the decalcification of the pineal gland. Anyway, in this stage, the soul light penetrates into the region of the pineal gland. There it produces an irradiation of the ethers of the head, of the vital airs. It produces a stimulation of the atoms of the brain so that their light is fused and blended with the other two, the etheric light and the soul light. And there is then produced the inner radiant sun of which the aspirant becomes conscious in his physical brain experience. Frequently, students speak of a diffused light or glow. This is the light of the physical plane atoms of which the brain is composed. Later, they may speak of seeing what appears to be like a sun in the head. This is the contacting of the etheric light plus the physical atomic light. Later, they become aware of an intensely bright electric light. This is the soul light plus the etheric and the atomic. When that is seen, they frequently become aware of a dark center within the radiant sun. This is the entrance to the path disclosed by the shining of the light upon the door. But students must remember it is possible to have reached a stage of high spiritual consciousness without seeing any of this brain radiance. And I think people should remember that. So it's important that you, just because you don't have that experience or somebody else that you know doesn't have that experience, doesn't mean that they didn't have or aren't at this particular point or stage. Because not all of the rays experience light the same way. So first ray will probably won't see any light. You know, they're not, they don't function that the same way as rays 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. So this is altogether the nature of phenomena. So you probably get less phenomena if you're working on ray 1, might be my guess. And I say that because reading through the material, they will talk about the inability to visualize. And they do not visualize in color. They don't have the colors, you know, in other words, that particular ray structure doesn't partake in those realms. So, so you, the only point I'm making here is you cannot go judge, well, did you see this light? Did you see that light? Well, yeah, then you ain't there. That is not necessarily true. We cannot judge that. Okay. We are, you know, we're nowhere near judging. He talks here about even one's ray structure. And somewhere he says, you know, humanity at this point is not even capable of determining that. They don't have a large enough perspective yet and range of understanding and moving up and down in those realms to be able to determine. So, okay, so this is altogether the nature of phenomena largely determined by the caliber of the physical body, by past karma and achievement, and by the ability of the aspirant to bring down power from on high and to hold that energy steady in the brain whilst he himself in meditation is detached from the form and can look serenely at it. So nobody should be running around, in other words, judging where somebody else is at. It's just not our ability from our perspective to be able to do that. When this has been accomplished, and it is not an objective to be worked for, but it is simply an indication to be registered in the consciousness and dismissed. And now he's talking about that last paragraph of being able to sit here and hold everything steady and then go out and look at yourself and observe. It says, when it's been accomplished, and it's not an objective to be worked for, simply an indication to be registered in the consciousness and dismissed, the consequent stimulation produces a reaction of the physical body. The magnetic power of the light in the head and the radiant force of the soul produce stimulation. So we got all this activity going on, and I mean, you just might think it's a bad case of gas or something, but it's not. It's this whole body, which is really incredible, has its own way of functioning other than just the normal stuff that we see on an everyday basis that, you know, we're interacting with. And this can all be going on and gets triggered and has its own little agenda. So that most people aren't even aware of, much less that it's something to be looking forward to and to want to be able to set up to be able to operate this way. So the centers begin to vibrate, and their vibration awakens the atoms of the material body until eventually the powers of the vibrating etheric body have swung even the lowest center in line into the highest. I mean, I don't think you learned that in high school. You know, the East did. They've got the chakras. They know this stuff. They've been educated. We in the West haven't, even, for that matter. Thus, the fires of the body, the sum total of the energy of the atoms, are swept into increased activity until such time as there is a rising up the spine of the fiery energy. This is brought about by the magnetic control of the soul, seated on the throne between the eyebrows. Here enters in the work of the one of the means of yoga, abstraction, or withdrawal, where the three lights are blended, where the centers are aroused and the atoms are also vibrating. It becomes possible for the man to center all three in the head at will. When by the act of the will and the knowledge of certain words of power, he can enter into samadhi and be withdrawn from his body, carrying the light with him. In this way, the greater light, the three fused and blended, illuminates the three worlds of man's endeavor, and the light is thrown upward and illuminates all the spheres of man's conscious and unconscious experience. This is spoken of in the occult writings of the masters in these words. Then the bull of God carries the light in his forehead, and his eye transmits the radiance. His head, the magnetic force, resembles the blazing sun, and from the lotus of the head, the path of light issues. It enters into the greater being, producing a living fire. The bull of God sees the solar angel and knows that angel to be the light wherein he walks. So it appears, considering we're talking about the solar angel, all this is happening on the mental plane, would be my guess. They seem to imply that in some of the words that it might be moving a little further, but initially, I mean, if he's talking about the solar angel, that's on the mental plane level 3. Then the work of the 4 proceeds. The 4 are at 1. So this is your atonement. Is that a question? I mean, I don't keep track of all that stuff in Christianity, but that somewhere along the line, that's an objective that's spoken of. That's a question. Anybody got the answer?
I don't know that it's discussed as an objective in Christianity, because I don't know that Christianity, well, our Christian churches don't necessarily teach objectives other than to be born again. And then, right? So,
Isn't there an atonement?
and they call it atonement. Yeah, there is atonement is in the Bible. It's written in there. I don't know that it's discussed a whole lot.
Well, this is evidently it.
Right.
So,
I mean, the only thing I can correlate it to is like in the Catholic religion is having to do penance before receiving communion or anything like that. Because that's, in a way, that's like atonement, right? You're looking for forgiveness.
Right,
Yeah.
so it is a
Yeah.
sacrament in the Catholic Church. There's
Right.
7 sacraments and it's one of them. So like Lisa and I don't receive communion every Saturday like our children do, because we were raised, we should go regularly. We have not been in a while, but also we struggle with our faith, although it's the one closest to what we believe.
Right,
Okay.
correct. We're kind of the same. We won't receive communion because we haven't done penance. If you don't, right, Don, like that's how we were raised. You did
But
penance
well,
first.
think about it. So this was the thing yesterday. It was like the Holy Trinity, right? And we're talking about a triangle now, and it's totally, everything is making sense, even in using Christianity as example as you read this. It all makes sense. It's exactly how the Catholic Church sees things, is exactly what we're reading right now. It's interesting. But the big thing is, even in my Native American background, is forgive yourself first, right? Before you go ask for it, even from God. So learn to forgive yourself, or else you're really not asking for forgiveness.
well, and you're not moving up anywhere if you can't forgive yourself, because then you're holding yourself right back where you, with whatever you want to be forgiven. In other words,
Oof.
yeah, I mean, you can't, if we consider our chart that we have, not our personal ones, I'm talking about the page 117. Okay, moving up that chart. Well, if you've stuck yourself with a guilt trip, or I'm a sinner, or whatever the ideology would be, down here on this lower level because I did something here and it was bad and I should be going to hell, which would mean going that way. And you can't let go of that and forgive yourself, like you said. How would you expect to move up? Because you've just nailed yourself down there and you're not letting that go.
Right. You're supposed to, in my book, in my opinion, in my own truth, that I've learned to help cope with some of my issues that I've had since I was a child, memories I used to haunt me. I've had to look at it as a tool to learn from, instead of going, oh man, I really made that person feel bad, or I said something I shouldn't have. Go, you know what? I learned from it. And now that I really understand what I mean when I say that, I feel better about those moments in my life. And every time I think of one, I write it down and I really concentrate on, all right, that was my learning moment, and I feel better about it.
You learn to let go of whatever you attach to it at that point in time.
Yes, ma'am. That's the better words. Yes, ma'am. Better words.
Yeah, and when you're young, I mean, there's so many things that get misinterpreted when you're young, because you've only got a data bank of a certain amount. And so anything you're going to fit into that period of your life and evaluate, it's evaluated against a very small data bank. So the one I use most often that people identify with, I could identify with, would be, if if young children hear their parents having sex and their parents are quite vocal, their evaluation of whatever they hear is going on would be more inclined to be, oh, something bad is happening here. You know, my mother is screaming, or so on and so forth. And so they
Oh, God.
attach that idea with that activity. When that was a 180 from what was probably really happening if they were evaluating it emotionally. You know, and that goes forward. So all I'm saying is, so much when you're young gets attached to whatever your range is. And if it sticks in there, you know, it's not necessarily there's any basis in truth with it, but it can still lock you in somewhere, until you can become conscious of that event. And now with a, let's say the person is 25, okay, and became conscious of that and how it was viewed, because they actually have that memory come back and can release it, because it was certainly misinterpreted. Yeah, under most circumstances, unless there really was violent behavior going on at the same time or something. But basically, when we're young, there's so many things that we don't have the range to evaluate, but we might be exposed to the event patterns, and they hold us back. I'm sure that there are things that if you were brought up in the Catholic Church of what's right and wrong, that you think you're a sinner. I mean, they're pretty good at helping you understand when you're a sinner, right?
Right. They don't even want you taking communion if you haven't been to church in a while. So yeah, they kind of got you by the, you know.
Yeah, see, I missed all that because I was in a very benign church. There was no hellfire and brimstone or any of that. We were just supposed to love God and Jesus and be happy we're humans or something, which was a nice place to basically come from. But, you know, when you start looking at this material, and we even look at that chart, and I mean, it's the movement up that's the positive one, and the movement down, you know, pulls you back to where you were. And if you want to keep going further down the elevator, yeah, that you're probably not making too many brownie points this lifetime. You know, on the, we're moving back on up scale, but there's really no hell. There's just the different levels and the ranges, and you're either working this way or you like staying down here a little longer, kind of thing. But we must always remember life sustains all of this, that it sustains this whole planet, sustains everything, but we're just, that gets personal here. It sustains this planet, and it sustains every human being on this planet who is alive. So our evaluation we should give second thoughts to, let's put it that way, before we're condemning this, that, or whatever. We may not want to go the route somebody else is going, and because we're going in another direction, but life sustains all of that. So that's one you can ponder and think about, because for some reason, we'll say that God bestows the life. Okay. Then for some reason, God is bestowing it on everyone that's here and alive. For some reason, I don't have the answer. I just know that I probably don't have the capacity to have that answer, but it is being done. I'm aware that life is, they're imbued with life just like we are. Whoever they are, they're alive on this planet. So I'm figuring that the planetary awareness or consciousness has a reason, and I'm not going to take umbrage with the planet on this one. So considering that, Tom, what'd you think about that?
You're gonna have to give me a minute.
Okay.
Um,
In other words, where does that fit in your consciousness if that's an awareness?
I am not sure. I mean, it's just, I guess it's just kind of there, right?
Yeah. Have you ever thought of that before?
I have to say, I don't think I have thought about that now, but I kind of just move along. So
Where's Franco? Is Franco here?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Comment on that?
No, you know what's funny is watching Tom's expression and then hearing him. It's because I know what's in his mind because I mean, if you've been around Tom for any length of time, he's a free spirit, and it's always one of those things where I told him, like, even watching him as a tech P, you're like, he's good at what he does when he's doing his thing, but at the same time, you're like, bro, like you should be leading a small cult or something. You know, that's how I always felt about Tom. It was never about rank or anything like that with Tom. It was always like just this free spirit dude, and he's down to earth. So when you start talking about consciousness, it's like it's just something that happens, kind of like Buddha. It just is, or sitting in silence, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm looking for all these answers. But when you leave true silence, even if it's 40 days and 40 nights, those answers, you're not looking for those answers anymore. Not because they've been answered, but because you realize they don't mean anything. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. It's the answers I had no longer mean anything, or the answers I was seeking no longer mean anything. It's just, and it's not that they don't mean anything. I guess that's the wrong word, but it just is. I'm trying to be more present.
Mm-hmm.
And when memories creep in my mind, I'm trying to just be like, no, I'm gonna write that down and address it and then be done with it.
Okay.
So
How about Donnie?
You know, I think it was a definite process. As so long as I'm still talking about what you guys are, the subject that we're on, because I got thrown off a little bit, but I thought it was I felt like I definitely had to go through a process of letting go. And then it seems like after you let it go, that it didn't matter anyway. You should have just let it all go. But it seemed like a process, if that makes sense. And
Okay,
it made me.
My question was, considering life sustains everything,
Oh, okay.
here, and they're not all like you. In other words, there's a great divergence in humanity. There's good, bad, and whatever else is the way most humans look at it. And there needs to probably be some evaluation. But the essence is that the life, the little divine spark, is in everything that's on this planet. That
Well, my answer to that question is pretty simple. If you read some of the non-canonical books from the Bible, and you know, I don't know, I forget which one it is. I could probably find it for anybody. It says that you curse Satan and you curse yourself. So there's the whole spectrum. It's here. You're not getting around that. That's just how I see. I love the whole thing. I appreciate the whole thing, because without the whole thing being here at the lower levels, you just wouldn't even be allowed to even be here either, because we're operating at a very base level through all those lives until we get to this point. So how can we judge any of that?
you're so right, man. And there's a difference between judging and discernment. And it's okay to look with discernment, but you can judge
Yeah.
yourself only, right? Oh my God, you're so right.
So,
If you can look at for the divine light in everyone you come across, not just the people you like, even the people you disagree with, things just change. And I'm trying to learn that every day. It's every day, every time, every second.
mhm.
Pretty cool, man. I'm glad you said that.
Word.
Okay. So, I'm at bottom of 108 now. In these two rules, the foundation of magical work of the soul has been laid down. Let us list, for sake of clarity, the steps. So again, the importance of our physical body and what it is designed to do, and it participates in all of these steps. And when I say physical, we're also including the emotional and the mental. It's all still in substance. The solar angel, the soul, begins the work of initiating the personality. So here's where we start. We start with the solar angel. We start on level mental, sub-level 3. That's where the solar angel, and it begins the work of initiating the personality. Well, the personality is the physical, the emotional, and the mental that are above sub-level 3. So it's now going to come down to initiate the personality, if you will. He withdraws his forces from soul enterprises in the spiritual kingdom, meaning that soul has had its direction going up into the spiritual kingdom, which is the spiritual triad. And remember, DK always says the soul is the initiate here. He's the one wanting the initiation in actuality. And the centers his attention on the work to be done. So he is withdrawing his forces from looking upward, the soul itself, because now something has drawn his attention to the fact that this thing that got incarnated that he had ordered has evidently got his act together a little bit. And now, so I'll turn my searchlight and I'll look down here. Let's see what's happening. Okay, see what we can do with this thing at this point, meaning us. Okay, so the soul then enters into deep meditation. The magnetic rapport with the instrument in the 3 worlds is instituted. That means you guys, or whoever's running around, who has managed to catch the attention of the soul enough so it'll even turn and look. You know, it's like the little kid taps on his mom or dad's back or leg or knee, or keeps banging on there till they turn around and look. Well, that's pretty much about the same kind of thing here. It's finally we have caught the attention of the soul. He will the magnetic rapport with the instrument in the 3 worlds is instituted. So you got his attention at least enough to turn around and look. The instrument, meaning man, responds and enters into meditation. The work proceeds in ordered stages with cyclical activity. Anybody around here being able to figure out there probably is ordered stages and cyclical activity?
Yes.
You're on, you get a little juice, and then you get the plug gets pulled, so to speak, or the direct current for a little while, and then you so speak to that one, guys.
I
Who wants
like
to-
Tom's experience with that. He's got a fresh one. He could probably talk to that real well.
Well, we're the same person, Donnie, so why don't you tell me
Well,
about
there
it?
you
No,
go.
I'm just- No, I think it's just you go through your stages of where you feel like you're seeing phenomena and then you're not, and it's like, ooh, what's going on here? And it kind of comes in waves, but it's really always there. It's just, I think you go through a phase, you ground it, and then the next rush comes and you work through that, and you ground that. It's just an endless cycle. It's like talk about quite a bit. It's the journey is always just beginning, right? You're never going to get to the top. I don't think there is a top.
No, that's what, when the days and nights of Brahma, the top is quite a ways away. It's the nights of Brahma instead of the days,
Right.
which, what, those numbers are probably this long if you put them in print.
Mhm.
If you get into Blavatsky's secret doctrine and you get these numbers of the length of the days and nights of Brahma or something, they're what, 12, 15 digits long?
Yeah, it's 418 trillion years or something.
Yeah, so
Something.
but the work proceeds in ordered stages and cyclical activity. And so there is an order to every one of those experiences.
Hmm.
You don't have to consciously know it. All you have to be is consciously aware that you're experiencing it, because it is there. You're not creating this, you are participating in a process. And then you want to ground it all the way down, so to speak, so that it's solid. Everything is connected. Okay, you're not leaving any missing pieces. The left foot isn't stuck down here all by itself and everybody else went up the elevator or anything like that. It's got to be complete. You want to make sure that you want to make sure you're aware of that, so you're not even trying to short circuit something, even though you don't mean to. It's just, it is the stage. And the cosmic consciousness, he talks about the timing generally on those stages of when the peak experience for what he's measuring shows up. And I think it's like May or April or May, somewhere in there. Usually you'll get that peak and then that all's got to settle down, and then you think it's gone away and you're just back to old normal, whomever, whatever, and oh, what a bummer. And and you think you lost it all. You didn't, but you don't realize that. So, but
It's,
initially, well, you're on
sorry.
a high, can't believe, because you're experiencing some upper level of energy that you didn't have before, that is lighter in nature and lighter probably in more light. And so, oh wow, man, I'm woohoo and really feeling great initially, and then you start to absorb that and becomes part of you, and then it's yeah, you work it into a point, and eventually you think you lost it.
Mhm.
Because it's no longer, you're no longer on this high.
Yeah. Your feet get heavy again.
Yeah. But the essence of whatever information, experience, however you want to deal with it, is now yours. It's just that it's old hat now, from your conscious perspective. You know, again, like I said, it's like a 4th of July sparkler. You light it once and you get, okay, try to light it again. The same sparkler, nothing happens. It looks like a dud. You know, it's done, it's spent. The union of spirit and matter is where light comes from, in every aspect. But in your high experiences that you have like that, I mean, it's like that sparkler going off, boom, and it just, you know, it's great, it's euphoria. But that sparkler ain't getting lit again, because you've done that one.
Mhm.
Okay. So now it's on in the grander cycle of picking up the next cycle whenever that comes. And that doesn't mean it comes next year because you had one this year. You don't know. You can't judge those timings, because they're all keyed to a lot of other electromagnetic relationships that have to be in place. Okay. So, and our mind doesn't have the capacity to go calibrate exactly where we are at any given time. You know, if it was, we would be up on the top of the chart, not where we are. Okay, we don't have that perspective. So, so the work proceeds in ordered stages, cyclical activity. The light of the soul is thrown downwards. So in other words, you have attracted the soul now, and it is willing to obviously share a little, or at least to give you a hand up, in as much as his light, that light thrown downwards, and the light of the vital body, the one you have in the physical form, is synchronized with that in the head. So now you're lighting up the energy. That light of the soul comes in, and we got a party, right? All of a sudden, everything's working. We're going to turn on all the lights here and light everything up. So the light of the vital body and the physical form is synchronized with that of the head, and the centers swing into activity. The light of the soul and the two other aspects of lights are so intense that now all of life in the three worlds is illuminated. That's when you're having wondrous euphoria in the experience, is everything's lit up. Alignment is produced. The work of discipleship and of initiation becomes possible and proceeds according to the law of being. So, and again, that's according to the law of being, which functions from a much higher level downward. It's not our law, we decide. Okay. And these are when he will talk about laws and rules in rays and initiations, the rules are what humans in the course of eons have figured out works best, and probably you should consider when you're in process. The laws are the basic functions of these upper levels and how they're designed. And now they're in when we hit the mental plane, we got concretion of energy so that these things up there last. It's not like being down in the sandbox. It's not like working with Play-Doh. Well, let's make it look this way this time, and then we'll restrike it and make it another way. When you get to the upper level, the 4 upper levels, you are with structures that they're set, and they work in a certain way, and they're not going to change. You will work to become consciously aware of their functionality and their information, so on and so forth. But you're not going to go in there and twist them and turn them and change them this way or that way. You are now going in union with God, if you will. And that's one of the things that, like the Nestorians and early Christianity, that was one of the arguments, was man makes his union with the divine. That one was tossed out in terms of the at the Council of Nicaea. They finally, but the argument was going on from the 2nd century. Cyril and Alexandria and Theodosius and in Syria, and the Nestorians lost out. And we ended up with the Christianity we've got, that there was only one man and he was born perfect and there is to be no other, so you have to follow him. Where the union, this we're talking about, is the union. When you come up and make that connection with that spiritual triad after the 3rd, or experience during the 3rd, I think he says. By the time you're done with that, you have made that connection, and now then it's a whole nother levels of time for you to become that all the way up. because we're functioning in time. So we deal with it from a concept of time. But so the light of the soul is thrown downward. The light of the vital body and the physical form is synchronized to that that's going on in the head. The centers swing into activity. The light of the soul and two other aspects of light are so intense that now all life in the three worlds is illuminated. That's when they think you're crazy. By the way, anybody else watching you, because you're really lit up. Obviously, here everything is lit. Alignments produced. The work of discipleship and initiation becomes possible and proceeds according to the law of being. And the law of beings is those laws that are up in those upper four levels that we don't normally deal with yet. We will, according to cosmic consciousness, we're just starting to come into being able to make that connection, mankind as one, but it's one of his, it's part of his legacy. It's part of his destiny. Okay, but we're just getting there. Just like at one point we couldn't see either because we didn't have eyes that saw. And then they became, over eons of time, functional to the point where we have them now, and they're probably still expanding because we're getting some etheric vision for people. And so this also is part of our destiny and part of our legacy. But what's happening here is we just want to move a little faster. That's why we're here on a Sunday morning in early sometimes. So we want a little jump start. That's why we're pushing. There's other people who are just quite happy where they are and everything works well for them. And but this material is for people who want to push a little faster, a little harder. So the principles and the personalities, I'm on page 109 now. There is, however, a point which merits, the question I wanted to ask, okay, because I don't know all these things. Every once in a while, I watch Casablanca and Sydney Greenstreet, and they're, of course, in Casablanca, and that's what, in Morocco? And so Sydney Greenstreet, he's the bar owner, and obviously the other guy is too. So Sydney Greenstreet, when he comes in, he goes like this. So I'm assuming that that is some recognition or something in Middle Eastern philosophy. Anybody know what that represents?
Some sort of greeting, I assume.
Well, yeah, and he does make that greeting, but then now for the Catholics, what does this mean?
The Holy Trinity. But also when he does that, it could be a symbol of, like how they say the salute came from knighthood and lifting the mat, the visor. When you think about Islam and what they would have to do to make facial contact, is the removing of the cloth around the face.
Okay, but it's also here, to here, to here, to here.
Well, in the Catholic faith, we also have, when you do before we do the gospel, it's in my mind, you do a cross on your forehead, in my words, across your lips, the sign of the cross, and then in your heart, and you do the sign of the cross there.
And I think with the Greenstreet, there was a fourth one. So anyway, as we go on here, I wanted to ask that because when they talked about, I mean, you end up going down. It's probably just a little bit further here where you're ultimately involving the solar plexus center. Anyway, there is, however, the principles and personalities, a point which merits consideration and which could be approached in the form of a question. The student might well inquire into the matter as follows. Some people approach the problem of being through mental appreciation, others through the heart understanding. Some are motivated through the head, others through the heart. Some do things or avoid doing them because they know rather than feel. Some react to their surroundings mentally rather than emotionally. It's like, I'm going to go back to this because they know rather than they feel. It reminded me, my oldest son, when he was just out of high school, but we were using different cars because I think we were in business together. And I would say, he'd say, you know, I want to go somewhere. And I said, okay, well, if you take the van today, you need to be really extra careful. And I'm not saying he shouldn't take it, but I knew that he needed to be extra careful that day. He says, I guess I'll take the other one, because he's used to his mother. He knew that he didn't want to be, because I must have known something, or I wouldn't have said it because I don't care which one he drove. But this was not a good day for that unit, kind of thing. So in his case, he just had learned that, well, okay, if mom knows something, then I'm not going to question it. I'll just shift to something else, because my experience with her is generally, if she says it, there's a reason, kind of thing. But there's the difference between the knowing and the feeling kind of situation. Some do things or avoid doing them because they know rather than feel, blah, blah, blah. And the point on which to seek illumination is whether the path for some is not to serve because they know rather than love God, who after all is but their innermost selves. Is not the path of the occultist and of the sage rather than of the mystic and the saint. When all is said and done, is it not a question primarily of the ray one is on and the master under whom one serves one's apprenticeship? Is not true knowledge a species of intellectual love? If a poet can pen an ode to intellectual beauty, why not we express appreciation of a unity that is conceived of the head rather than of the heart? Hearts are well enough in their way, but they are not suited to the world's rough usage. And this is a question he's posing, as I understand. Can one do aught but accept his present limitation while seeking such transcendence as is by the divine law of evolution? Is there not such a thing by comparison as a spiritual inferiority complex on the part of such as are sensible or perhaps oversensitive of the fact that while their lives intellectually are replete with interest, the desert of their hearts has not yet been made to blossom like the rose? In other words, provided one repairs to his appointed station and there serves in his acceptance of brotherhood in the presence of fatherhood, what difference does it make that the fundamental postulate is with him a thing of the head rather than the heart? Now, this is DK answering. I would answer such a question following. It is not a question of ray or even of the basic distinction between the occultist and the mystic. In the rounded out individual, both head and heart must function with equal power. In time and space, however, and during the process of evolution, individuals are distinguished by a predominating tendency in any one life. It is only because we do not see all the picture that we draw these temporary distinctions. In one life, a man may be predominantly mental, and for him, the path of love of God would be unsuited. The love of God is shed abroad in his heart, and to a considerable degree, his occult approach is based on the mystical perception of past lives. For him, the problem is to know God with the view of interpreting that knowledge in love to all. Responsible love demonstrated in duty to group and family is therefore for him the line of least resistance. Universal love raying out to all nature and all forms of life will follow on a more developed knowledge of God, but this will be part of his development in another life. Okay. Students of human nature, and this all aspirants should be, would do well to bear in mind that there are temporary differences. People differ in their ray, which affects predominantly the magnetism of the life. The approach to truth, either the occult or the mystic path, having the stronger drawing power. Polarization, deciding the emotional, the mental, or the physical intent of a life. Status and evolution leading to the diversity seen among men. Astrological sign determining the trend of any particular life. And please note that that is for just for a life. And it's just a trend, so that because we focus on astrology a lot, but as you can see here, it's down the line as far as the determinations. And then there's the race, bringing the personality under the peculiar racial thought form. So the sub-ray on which a man is found, that minor ray which varies from incarnation to incarnation, largely gives him his coloring for this life. It is a secondary hue. Forget not, the primary ray of the monad continues through the eon. So I know some groups where the leader indicates he is a third ray monad. Okay. And he can determine his history and why. But the point is he sees and understands that's who he is. The majority of the system, I think when you start reading this material, there'll be second ray monads because this is the second ray system. Okay. And then there would be very rare occurrences where you would have the first ray monad, because that, one, it would be potentially be very destructive to this system. So the functionality in it from a monadic viewpoint would be somebody who might come in here and literally raise havoc with the existing forms and the existing design, and whether intentionally or not might not even be the case. But these are electromagnetic systems, and so the functionality of that energy on a first ray system is very different than the functionality of the second ray system, and probably the functionality of the third. Okay, so but basically I would say that they indicate most everything in this system is a second ray. And so even if you have any kind of first ray aspect, it's usually on the overall a second ray, but then you might be on the first sub level. But it's still colored for the most part by second ray. This is a love wisdom system. And that's what you're doing. And interestingly enough, when he gets in his rays and initiations and he gets to the back and you're getting ready to leave, you can't stay here. So you do graduate and you have to matriculate somewhere else. But he says the qualities of this system, which are what you have developed being in this love wisdom system, when you exit this system and go into a larger, wherever you're going, you will always embody the qualities that you learned in this system, and you take that to another part of the universe, wherever you're going. It becomes part of you, and I would assume then if you're creating something else, those qualities and those aspects you take out into wherever you're going. And anything you would create would still be an integral part of that, which might be a plus if in other words, we created something here, it's a certain quality, and now we can take it and it can be developed and utilized somewhere else that may not have that quality. So the subray on which a man is found, that minor ray, which varies from incarnation to incarnation, largely gives him his coloring of this life. It is his secondary hue. Forget not, the primary ray of the monad continues through the eon. It changes not. It is one of the three primary rays that eventually synthesize the sons of men. The ray of the ego varies from round to round, and in more evolved souls from race to race, and comprises one of the 5 rays of our present evolution. It is the predominating ray to which a man's causal body vibrates. So what they're basically saying, the ray of the ego, well, the ego is the soul, okay? That is his causal body. So the ray of the ego varies from round to round, more evolved souls race to race, comprises one of the 5 upper levels, corresponds to the ray of the monad, or it may be one of the complementary colors to the primary. The ray of personality varies from life to life. Okay. Till the gamut of the 7 subrays of the monadic ray have been passed through. So that one is, let me go back here again. The ray of the personality. So you're gonna be different, is what he's implying, through all these different incarnations. And so right there, the personality ray varies from life to life till the gamut of the 7 subrays of the monadic ray have been passed through. So you're just going around and around. So the point I'm making is you can't go look at somebody and point and say, okay, well, you can't pigeonhole them. Okay. Because you wouldn't even know all their lifetimes, much less, all you're looking at is one version for the moment in this lifetime. Therefore, in dealing with people whose monads are on a similar or complementary ray, it will be found that they approach each other sympathetically. We must remember, however, that evolution must be far advanced for the ray of the monad to influence extensively. So the majority of cases do not come under this category. Because where does the monad sit? It sits on the top of the chart from page 117. So, and that has no interest in what is going on down here for a long time. You have to be you're developing in the spiritual triad, which is the zones of 3, 4, and 5, are connections. And then it's above the monad's above that. So, it has very little interest in whatever is going on down here. So when they say that connection it's for the most part are not going to have an effect. So you're going to look to things that are a little bit lower. So with the average advanced men who are struggling to approximate themselves to the ideal, similarity of the egoic ray will produce mutual comprehension and friendship follows. So in other words, if your soul rays are similar, you're probably going to recognize each other. You're going to be friends. You're not going to run around and say, oh, well, hey, your soul ray is like mine, so we're going to get along fine. It's just intuitive kind of thing, but it will just be something where somehow or another, you just really like each other. You feel good around each other. And you're probably going to want to be friends and develop a relationship. Mutual comprehension and friendship follows. It is easy for 2 people on the same egoic ray to comprehend each other's point of view. And they become great friends with unshaken faith in each other for each recognizes the other acting as he himself would act. Yeah, so I like you because you're like me. So you reinforce me. So I have no argument with you, right? You make me feel good. Now I even feel better about myself than I did before I met you. Kind of thing. But when added to the egoic similarity of ray, you have the same ray of personality, then you have one of those rare things, a perfect friendship, a successful marriage, an unbreakable link between the two, and this is rare indeed. Okay. When you have two people on the same personality ray, but with egoic ray dissimilar, you have those brief and sudden friendships and affinities that are as ephemeral as a butterfly. So, you know, you may meet somebody sometimes and you have a great rapport and a great conversation, and you exchange whatever it is that that you're going to have conversations about, and that's it. You know, it's not a lasting friendship. You just had a really good exchange. That was all there was to exchange. And you've both benefited from it in some way, I'm sure. But off you go. And there's no reason to connect again. You know, there's no pull, there's no draw, there's no and that's it. But the interesting thing was there was an exchange in the first place, which was beneficial probably to both of you. And that's all there needed to be. These things need bearing in mind, and with their recognition comes the ability to be adaptable. Clarity of vision results in a circumspect attitude. Another cause of difference can be due to the polarization of the bodies. Unless this too meets the recognition in dealing with people, lack of comprehension ensues. When you use the term a man polarized in his astral body, you really mean a man whose ego works principally through that vehicle. Okay. Polarity indicates the clarity of the channel. Let me illustrate. The ego of the average man has its home on the third subplane of the mental plane. And we know that, right? That's our chart, page 117. The soul sits on the third subplane of the mental plane. If a man has an astral vehicle largely composed of the third subplane astral matter, and a mental vehicle mostly on the fifth subplane, the ego will center his endeavor on the astral body. Okay. Because we're talking third plane and third plane, even though one's on the astral, one's on the mental. If he has a mental body of fourth subplane matter and an astral body of fifth subplane matter, the polarization will be mental. In other words, he's saying the soul is on the third subplane. It's going to identify with third subplane first, if it has a choice. Okay. It's going to try to identify with the thing that's closest to it subplane wise, is what he's indicating here. Following? I'm not sure if we're even advanced enough to know why he's explaining this, but we're going through it anyway. Okay. When you speak of the ego taking more or less control of a man, you really mean that he has built into his bodies the matter of the higher subplanes. So there's the answer to the question I just posed of the why. Okay. So you've got the ego takes control with interest only when the man has almost entirely eliminated the matter of the seventh the 6th, and the 5th subplanes from his vehicles. In other words, when we go back to A.A.B. and we talk about the vibrations and that you are always looking for that matching vibration, because to completely succeed moving up a full plane, like from like the physical, now we're talking way back when, she'll indicate that when you have experienced all the vibrations that are on that range of the physical, then you can take the first initiation, because you are fully equivalent to it. Nothing will draw you back, because you've got the match to all of it. So it's not that plane is no longer going to attract you and pull you back because you're missing something. Okay. The ego takes control with interest only when the man has almost entirely eliminated matter of the 7th, the 6th, and the 5th subplanes from his vehicles. When he has built in a certain portion of matter of the 4th subplane, the ego extends his control. When there is a certain portion of the 3rd subplane, then the man is on the path. When the 2nd subplane matter predominates, then he takes initiation. And when he has matter of only the atomic substance, he becomes a master. So if you want to know what it takes, there you are. Therefore, the subplane a man is on is of importance, and the recognition of his polarization elucidates life. So you are where you are.
And by master, he just meant master of that plane, right? Not, he didn't mean actual, because no, come on.
When you're of only atomic substance, you become a master, yes.
Oh, no, I know, but he does talk about, I think like 7, 6, and 5, you become a master of that plane. I think what he meant when you get to the first subplane of that, of each level, you become a master of that.
No,
plane.
he said when his matter is of only atomic substance. That means every one of the subplanes going on up and out. We're nothing to do with the lower 3 planes.
Okay. Just checking, because I'd read some of that somewhere before. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Therefore, the subplane a man is on of is importance, and the recognition of his polarization elucidates a life. In other words, his polarization, whatever it is, describes the life he's going to have the potential to live when he's on that subplane. The third thing you need to remember is that even when these 2 points are admitted, the age of the soul's experience frequently causes a lack of comprehension. The above 2 points do not carry us very far, for the capacity to sense a man's ray is not for this race as yet. And that's what I was saying earlier, when they run around trying to guess what everybody's ray is on. But he's basically saying, look, you don't have the capacity. Mankind doesn't have the capacity to determine that. He's not there yet. He doesn't have enough distance of perspective to be able to look back at anything and say, okay, well, that is 5th ray and that is blah, blah, blah. Okay. Approximate supposition and the use of the intuition is all that's possible now. Now, he worked with Discipleship in the New Ages. He has 2 volumes in there, and he worked with groups early on, and he determined their ray structure. But that was pretty much it. I don't think there's anybody else. I know there's groups who figured they could figure that stuff out, but basically, I don't think you could count on it. You know, you wouldn't bet your life on it, what somebody told you, or at least I wouldn't consider that at this point in time. The little evolved cannot comprehend completely the much evolved. And in a lesser degree, the advanced ego comprehends not the initiate. The greater can apprehend the lesser, but the reverse is not the case. That's just logic, right? Yeah. As regards the action of those whose point of attainment greatly transcends your own, I can only ask you to do 3 things. Reserve judgment, because their vision is greater. Forget not that one of the greatest qualities members of the lodge have achieved is their ability to view the destruction of form as unimportant. And their concern is with the evolving life. So let's talk about, what does that mean? One of the themes that came from the East when in the 60s, or in even the 50s for that matter, because the beatniks should really be counted in there as being opening the avenue for the United States, because they were in New York, but they brought in some of the Eastern stuff before the 60s came. And we had that descent of energy that came down and lit up the whole planet and ignited the concept of love in a way it hadn't been ignited. And then the East and the West, again, now we get the Eastern philosophies and religions coming in. So they have a different, well, the Eastern religion, of which we've got to talk about, part of this is certainly being a blend of East and West. But one of the things that was said was, they used to say, well, this is just a dream. Okay. In other words, what you're living here is just a dream. And it's an illusion. Okay. Well, we now know it is an illusion because science has figured out how we function physically. And we take light, our eye reads it, translates it, and gives us this. What we see and what we experience. That's one of the values of looking at twin dimensions and understanding the evolution of that, because he very clearly in there tells you we read light. That's what this body does in its most abstract form. If you want to really break it down, is we read light, we discern what information is in that light. It depends how many of our sublevels of our senses are working as to how much information we can read of any given pattern of light.
That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why you say to me, how do you know that?
Mhm.
Remember that just recently? I said, you know, it was such and such and such and such. You said, how do you know that?
Mhm.
Okay, well, because I could see it.
Mhm.
Kind of thing. So that's why I stress so much the body, because it's all got to happen here for any given individual. This is the unit that you have that's walking around, that's already equipped, if you bring it up to speed, to way go beyond what the current word on the street is. Well, man is never going to be able to keep up with where we're going. Okay, so we're going to have to shove him full of chips and plug him in and, you know, help him keep up. That's the most absurd thing that you could come up with. Only somebody who doesn't really understand what this is all about could make a statement like that. Somebody who is down in these lower 3 levels and has no idea of what's up there could make a statement like that, because they're perceptually quite limited. They may see some little dynamics of, oh, I can scientifically do this or do that, boom, boom, boom. Okay, but that's it. So they have to just try to figure out how to get a heads up on the other, but they have no idea. It's just like he said here, you can have the most advanced scientific, you could have the highest IQs, and they don't have a clue on the mental plane that soul is over there. They're totally bereft of all of that development of the human potential and where it can take you. So all they can try to do is get a bigger computer and run things faster and see if you can figure out the future. That's why I have to take, when I listen to this stuff, and they're excited about the quantum computers and stuff. Well, what are they computing? They're computing the future here in time and space. They're not computing the potential and the future in that spiritual triad because they can't do it. So, I mean, you know, they're extremely limited. They just don't realize it.
We can't get out of our own way.
Well, they don't even know they're in their own way.
Right.
So, so going back to this statement though, and the point of this statement is the members of the lodge. In other words, when you get up into the spiritual triad, remember, you have given up your physical form at the fourth initiation. Okay. And you no longer need to have a physical form, but you're to maintain your consciousness. So you don't need the body. You're running around. We can't say fully formless because there has to be some level of substance, no matter how fine and refined it is. If you listen to A.A.B. Besant, all the way up. But you don't need to incarnate. The causal body has been given up, meaning the soul, and it was called the causal body because that was the only way you got here. Was the soul decided for another reincarnation, your order ticket was put in, and you're, you know, you're born. You incarnate, and you've got but it's the only way that you could get a form and you could get in line was that way. Okay, now you have evolved to the point where the consciousness, and you needed that because what was it doing? It was collecting all the consciousness you built, this soul, because it's got to take it from the bottom up all the way to the top. So there had to be some way to get up that far. So that soul has been saving all the consciousness that you have created till you can get there and collect it for yourself and hook up to the spiritual triad, which is the goal. And you were missing pieces. There was no ladder. We had to build the ladder. That's that straight line on your little chart of consciousness that humanity, for the most part, has built now to that, the mental being able to function up to level 4, sub-level 4. But then there is that leap of which the soul has wanted, but it's been stuck on level 3. It's got a form, a structure equivalent to the energy qualities of level 3 that has been storing all of your history, all of your conscious creation, till you can get up there and connect with it. So the conscious creating machinery here, plus the consciousness that's been created. So they talk about putting that consciousness together. And in that experience, level 3, he says you do make an initial contact with each of the permanent atoms in the spiritual triad. So now, and this follows with the Christian philosophy, is Christ will tell you that after the cross, And after the process, because that was all part of that process, he's demonstrating he can come back after he's died and reappear, and he still has life and consciousness. Okay, so that's the process. Those are the levels that you need to go through to get to that point. I'm still working with this one sentence of their ability to view the destruction of form as unimportant. Down here, you always needed a form. That physical body had to be built. It was built by the, within the form of the mother. It was just, but it needed both the mother-father union to build the form. Okay. And it, in the end, it gets traded in. That form is discarded. Whatever consciousness you created, the essence of that synthesized is stored until you can get up there. So what he's talking about here in this sentence is that forget not one of the greatest qualities members of the lodge, the Great White Lodge, those are the ones that have reached that spiritual triad. They're functioning on those 3 levels. There is their ability to view the destruction of form as unimportant. Well, why do they think it's unimportant? Because they now know that those are just, it's like going to the store and trying on a bunch of different dresses or a bunch of different suits or whatever. It's basically no different, the levels of incarnations that we have, because they're only there for a purpose, and the purpose is to create some more consciousness that goes into the soul until you can work your way up there. So those lives, as invested as we are with them here, with our emotions, with our mental capacity, with our physicality, all of that. And they're for real down here. And you're developing qualities, you're developing value systems, you're developing whatever it takes to move up that chart. And with every one of those sub levels going up, the quality of the life as a human being will, I'm gonna be value judgment here, improved, the quality of life improved in terms, and he's gonna deal with what that quality means coming in here. So I'm not going to fully elucidate on that, but in other words, that's what that does. But when you get to that level of consciousness where you have that union between the integrated personality and the soul, then, and you move up into the spiritual triad, you realize that, hey, that's just a game that's being played down there over and over and over again with the forms that need to be created to accomplish the goal. But in other words, that given life in that time frame, you're fully invested in it, but when it's over, it's over. It's discarded. Okay, so they see the destruction of the form as unimportant. So when you get up, especially, I think he indicates their concern is the evolving life. So their concern is, hey, if you need to, this soul needs to incarnate, it sends down this individual, he lives his life, he accomplishes a certain goal. Their concern is that evolving life. Not how many life forms do you have to go through, or, oh, isn't that terrible? We got to trash this guy. He's 60 or 70 or 80 and he's run his course. And isn't that horrible? They don't think that at all. They recognize that that's the way it is. That's the way it's processing. And that is, it's just the way this system is designed down on these levels. Because they're operating now where if they really needed to incarnate they can do that. They can show up here. Donnie, you mentioned one time, you had a quote, something about you materialize the form and everybody sees it. I'm talking about somebody up on the upper levels, like one of the masters or whatever. I don't know if it was DK or not DK, but KH or what. In other words, that if they really need to be down here in form, they can, it's called a Maya Varupa. They can materialize the form and everybody sees it. Okay. And so every once in a while in here, you're going to have a comment, especially when you hit the upper levels, the Shambhala levels, so on and so forth. And he makes a remark, it won't be in this book, that they decided to let World War II go and not intervene because they figured humanity could handle it. And, you know, and the first time I saw that, which was decades ago, I thought, what the hell are you talking about? You know, you just could arbitrarily make that decisions that the rest of us down here on these lower levels are going through war and getting shot and killed and all the stuff the war means. And my first concerns, I mean, I'll go back to the sentence. It says, reserve judgment, their vision is greater. Okay, well, I was reserving no judgment in those days in that regard. And I thought, you know, screw you if you think you can make those decisions, because they're really real for us. Okay. I mean, we experience the difficulties with every one of our senses and every one of our, the way we look, and we see how people are hurt and all of this and that. You guys have had the war, so you should know. But as far, you are going to find in these books that on those upper levels, whether you're getting blown to smithereens or not in a physical form is not their first concern. It's the evolving life and its evolvement to be able to work its way up that's their concern. So their evaluation is going to be, all right, well, what's going to set the evolving life up a notch, and then another notch and another notch, you know, not that, oh, okay, well, he didn't get his 95 years, you know, got short-circuited at 35 or something because he ran into a brick wall or you know, and should have known that you don't drive 100 miles an hour into a brick wall and expect that your form's gonna take it. Yeah. Learned a lesson there.
So that perspective that they have, it's probably good to make that our perspective.
Well,
as quickly as we can, right?
Evolution. That's really part of your evolving perspective. And actually, if you have the science and you understand that we do read light and we do translate it, and that well, it's just like Einstein couldn't embrace the quantum because he said God doesn't play dice with the world. Yeah, science will explain that to you now, actually, but the majority of us are not believing that science as a real thing, because if we were, we would be up there where he's talking about their vision is greater. Because if we really understood that, if we really saw that, if we really were of that level, that's how we would see it. But yes, you're right. To start to at least entertain the understanding that this is ephemeral. here is that, it doesn't last long, right? Ephemeral means something doesn't last too long. I'm not saying effeminate, I'm just saying ephemeral. But we don't see it that way. I mean, we're fully invested in what goes on here. You value your children, you value the relationship you have. You're going to protect what you have. And if you lose some of that, the chances are you're going to be emotionally broadsided like you could have not even imagined. Okay. I mean, that's the reality of it.
So knowing that these perspectives are coming from the higher levels, we keep what we got and we add these perspectives, and now you've got a whole new thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly going to second guess yourself on some of your value judgments, I guess, is probably what I would say. I mean, you're not going to go run somebody down and say, oh, that's okay. He wasn't real anyway. Okay. Because that's not what you're here to learn either. You're here to really work the qualities of good and the behavior of good and all of that within you as a living thing, as a everyday living quality. You're working those qualities into your life. So now we probably have some people on the planet who think in reverse. And I mean, we got a lot of drive-by shootings. We've got levels of quality where they're saying, well, those people don't matter anyway, or I really hate that person, so therefore I'm going to eliminate them or something. That's a whole nother level of quality that's minus the preservation qualities. And again, like I said, he's going to talk about that relative judgment. So I don't want anybody to think I'm talking about, hey, that this is all expendable here, because it's not. We're here because you're integrating the qualities of good, either slowly or fastly, however, whatever's going on in your world. And they become an integral part of you, because until you have them at a certain level, you can't even, the soul has no interest in you yet. And you can't get up the ladder. Because again, every one of these levels of energy has information in it. And the farther you go up, the more advanced the information is, if I use the terms relative to where we are when we say advanced or not advanced. I'm just trying to define things so other people who don't normally see these I don't want them to misinterpret. But it says, realizing that all events are brought around by the brothers with a wise purpose in view. So now he's talking about the white brotherhood, the people who are fully conscious up on the higher levels of the chart that we have, that we look at. That would be your brotherhood. Lesser grade initiates, though utterly free agents, fit into the plans of their superiors, just as you do in your lesser way. Okay, can put us in our place, right? They have their lessons to learn, and the rule of learning is that all experience has to be bought. There's no free rides. You can't piggyback on somebody else, so to speak, and have it stick. The only way you move up this chart is when you are fully, whatever sub-level you're working on, you have all of that energy within you. Then you can move up and deal with another level of energy. But there can't be holes in missing down below. So you have to be solid from there up. Apprehension comes by the punishment that follows an ill-acted judgment. Their superiors stand by to turn to good account situations brought about by the errors of those inferior in their point of development. So realize all events are brought about by the brothers with a wise purpose in view. Lesser grade initiates, though utterly free agents, fit into the plans of their superiors, just as do you in your lesser way. They have their lessons to learn, and the rule of learning is that all experience has to be bought. Apprehension comes by the punishment that follows an ill-judged act. Their superiors stand by to turn to good account situations brought about by the errors of those inferior in point of development. Remember also that the law of rebirth holds hidden the secrets of the present crises. Groups of egos come together to work out certain karma involved in past days. Men have erred grievously in the past. Punishment and transmutation are the natural working out. Violence and cruelty in the past will reap its heavy karma, but it lies in the hands of you all now to transmute the old mistakes. Also, bear in mind that principles are eternal. Personalities are temporal. Principles are to be viewed in the light of eternity. Personalities from the standpoint of time. The trouble is that in many situations, two principles are involved, one of which is secondary. The difficulties lie in the fact that both being principles, both are right. It is a rule for safe guidance always to remember that usually basic principles for their wise comprehension and fruitful working out call for the play of the intuition. Well, secondary principles are more purely mental. So here's where some of your value judgments start to come in. The methods, hence, necessarily differ. When holding to basic principles, the wisest methods are silence and a joyful confidence that the law works, an avoidance of all personality innuendo except wise and loving comment, and a determination to see all in the light of eternity and not of time, coupled with a constant endeavor to follow the law of love and see only the divine in your brothers, even if on an opposing side. Now, in secondary principles, which all opposing forces are at present emphasizing, and this would have been written pretty much between the two world wars, 1 and 2. Okay. In secondary principles, which all opposing forces are at present emphasizing, the use of the lower mind involves the danger of criticism, the employment of methods sanctioned by time in the 3 worlds, methods involving personal attack, invective, and expenditure of force along destructive lines, and a spirit contrary to the law of the plane of unity. The term opposing forces is used rightly if you imply it only in the scientific sense and mean the contrasting pole that leads to equilibrium. So, remember, therefore, that opposing groups may be quite sincere, but the concrete mind acts in them as a barrier to the free play of the higher vision. So that's a fundamental sentence. Okay. You got 2 opposing forces, so what do you get? You get a standoff, right? If they're equal and opposing, you would get a standoff. And so then you have a barrier to the free play of a higher vision. If a higher vision could actually synthesize these 2 out, you're not getting there in accordance with the fundamentals he's laid down there, because the opposing groups they've got their mindset, because remember, that's the concretized energy now. And so you get a standoff. They're not going to work it out. They're not going to look for an alternative because they're standing on whatever their idea is. Their sincere.
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say there's wars based on that, right? DK talks about there's certain cultures are more concretized, working on different levels than others, and then they meet, and then a war comes about.
Yep. Their sincerity is great, but their point of attainment along some lines less than that of those who adhere to basic principles seen in the light of the intuition. The principle is that which embodies some aspect of the truth on which this system of ours is based. It is the seeping through to the consciousness of man of a little of the idea on which our logos bases all he does. Okay. The basis of all logoic action is love in activity, and the fundamental idea on which he bases action connected with the human hierarchy is the power of love to drive onward, called evolution, if you like. Call it inherent urge, should you so prefer, but it is love causing motion and urging onward to completion. It is the driving of one and all to further expression. Hence, this principle should underlie all activity and the government of lesser organizations, if founded on love, leading to activity, would lead to a divine urge in all of its members, driving them likewise on to the fullest expression, and thus tend to more adequate completeness and more satisfactory endeavor. A principle, when really fundamental, appeals at once to the intuition and calls out an immediate reaction of assent from the man's higher self. It makes little or no appeal to the personality. In other words, a fundamental principle is, he's saying the soul will recognize it, but the personality probably it's not appealing at all because they're not getting their own little egoic trip, or for whatever reason they set this out to get some secondary reason. If they deal with the fundamental principle, in other words, if I want to start this war because I want to, I'm a munitions factory or a military industrial complex, and the fundamental principle would be, let's sit down and talk this out. That isn't going to appeal to getting your coffers funded from the government. So hell no, we ain't going to work it out. If we have to, we'll make sure it looks worse. So
everybody's a lobbyist for their own nonsense.
Yeah. So it's rejected on the lower level because the lower levels are always, they're dealing in materialism for starters. That's the world they live in. And they're dealing in forces, not energy. Pure energy comes from higher above. Forces are, after you eat the food and it regurgitates through your system, and it's created the force that you can go, walk and talk and fundamentally be alive. So everything is so secondary down here. Probably 3 and 4 times down some of the stuff that we have. It's always going to be involving something else. You aren't going to have pure love. Why would you have pure love down here? Because pure love is not going to hold anything. It's not going to control anything. It's going to be but it's not going to be possessive. You know, everything we do down here is going to be governed by astral plane emotions, lower mental, you know, or some physicality. So what he's saying here is that the higher a principle will generally not be seen as a positive from our lower mental realm and our emotional drive and whatever we're trying to accomplish, because we're usually working against something else. Almost always. It makes little or no appeal to the personality. It embodies a conception of the ego in his relationships to others. A principle is that which governs always the action of the ego on his own plane, and it is only as we come more and more under the guidance of that ego that our personality conceives and responds to these ideas. In fact, one of the interesting points, I believe this was reported on the news, I guess the military, well, Trump was in office, brought some plan for Afghanistan, something they wanted to do in Afghanistan. I don't know exactly what it was. And he turns around and says, no, I'm not going to do that because it's going to kill 1,500 innocent civilians, and I'm not going to do that. Well, basically they're saying here that you're not even going to think of those ideas unless you're up on some level that's a little higher than where we normally function. Because that principle was, I don't want to kill innocent people. And why should these people have to die for this? What do you guys have a term for it? What is it? Just casualties or what is it?
Collateral damage.
Yeah, okay. So, and what I'm saying is we, for the most part, function on the levels of collateral damage is okay. Hey,
Right.
they're in the way, you know, they should have
Yeah,
moved.
it's acceptable for what some might perceive as the greater good, right?
Right, yeah.
But
Well, actually, the military
reality.
started to put humanity towards things towards the end of OEF, at least, before it's transitioned to something else. And CDE, or collateral damage, is more towards buildings. They called it CivCas, which is civilian casualty. So it gave it more of a, like, you can't just call a blanket group of dudes military aged males anymore. You have to say, I see men with, it looks like tools, or people with tools, if you can't identify their gender. It was very weird, but I kind of see it maybe the why now. I don't know.
Yeah, so basically he's saying a principle, when it's really fundamental, appeals at once to the intuition, which means you're up probably on level number 4 to some extent, calls out an immediate reaction of assent from the man's higher self, which would be then the soul, because they function pretty close to each other up there. It makes little or no appeal to the personality, which means physically, emotionally, and mentally, man is not responding to that because he's not on those levels. He doesn't even see those values as having any value. It embodies a conception of the ego in his relationship to others. A principle is that which governs always the action of the ego, meaning the soul, on his own plane. And it is only as we come more and more under the guidance of that ego that our personality conceives of and responds to these ideas. So most people are not working up on that level with their soul as their full consciousness. So they don't even conceive of and respond to those ideas. This is a point to be borne in mind in all dealings with others and should modify judgments. To apprehend a principle justly marks a point in evolution. So when you start thinking in those terms in your day-to-day life, he's saying that marks a point in evolution. A principle is that which insouls a statement dealing with the highest good of the greatest number. So here's some of the basic fundamentals related to that. That a man should love his wife is a statement of principle governing the personality, but it must later be transmuted into the greater principle that a man must love his fellow men. Okay. And I'm sure evolution-wise, we have gone through those stages where, what, because your wife was chattel for a long time. I can still even remember that the wife was chattel and the children were the same in the early 1900s. They belonged to you and you could do with them as you pleased. I mean, children's rights haven't been around that long. You know,
They're not around in some countries too, still.
right. But even in this country, if you beat your kid to the point of damage, it was still your right. You were the father. You were following in the footsteps of Christianity. And as the father, you had the right to discipline, you know. Now you go over into some of the Italian country, or Italian, European. I mean, look, Sicily, you got to, and the Middle East, that woman is yours to do with as you please, to a point of being able to kill them. They were your property.
Lisa needs to hear that one again.
Pardon?
Lisa needs to hear that statement. I'll remind her later.
Okay. So anyway, yes, we evolve, I'm sure, between the understanding and valuing in the relationship with one person. And yes, eventually we realize it's everybody we should value. But that's taken a long time for humanity to move in that direction. The principles of the three kinds and higher must be reached via the lower. So yeah, you get the concept on the lower level, and then eventually it's reached. Principles governing the lower personal self, dealing with the actions or active life of that lower self. They embody the third aspect or activity aspect of logoic manifestation, form the basis of later progress. They control man during his little evolved state and during his period of thoughtlessness, and might be comprehended more easily if I were to say they are embodied in the commonly accepted rules of decent living. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, have to do with a man's active life and the building up of character. And that's why I'm saying, yes, we talked earlier about those higher up on the chart, consciously evolved, are not concerned about the form, but down here, this is real. This is where we build those value systems in. So thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, have to do with a man's active life and the building up of character. That's part of what, when you're down here in that form, you're building consciousness that involves those, eventually involves bringing in those higher values, and then they become common values across the mass of humanity, but those come slow. But that's part of what you're here for. Principles governing the higher self and dealing with the love or wisdom aspect. It is with these that we are now concerned. And half the troubles in the world at present arise from the fact that these higher principles, having to do with love or wisdom in all their fullness, are only now beginning to be apprehended by the rank and file of mankind. In the quick recognition of their truthfulness and the attempt to make them facts without previously adjusting the environment to those ideals, comes the frequent clashing and warfare between those who, actuated by principles governing the personality, and those governing the higher self. So there's always going to be a battle on the way up, no matter what level you're on, until, well, you're in form for certain. Okay. Until more of the race are governed by the soul consciousness, this warfare is inevitable and cannot be avoided. When the emotional plane is dominated by the intuitional, then will come universal comprehension. The first set of principles is learnt by the man through grasping and the subsequent disaster that results from that seizure. He stole, he suffered the penalty, and he stole no more. The principle was wrought into him by pain, and he learnt that only that which was his by right and not by seizure could be enjoyed. The world is learning this lesson in groups now, for as its revolutionaries seize and unlawfully hold, they find the stolen properties suffices not but brings sorrow. This in time they learn the principles, thus in time. The second set of principles is learned through renunciation and service. A man looks away, having learnt the first principles, from the things of the personality, and in service learns the power of love in its occult significance. He spends and consequently receives. He lives the life of renunciation, and the wealth of the heavens pour in on him. He gives all and is full to completeness. He asks nothing for himself and is the richest man on earth. First principles deal with the differentiated units and with evolution through heterogeneity. Principles such as the race is learning now have to do with groups. The question is not what will be best for the man, but what will be best for the many. And only those who can think with this vision of the many as one can state these principles satisfactorily. They are the most important, for they are the basic principles of this love system. The trouble today is that men are confused. Certain first principles, lower activity fundamentals, are ingrained and inherent now. And a few of the higher egoic or love principles are seeping through into their bewildered brains, causing an apparent momentary clash of ideas. Therefore, like Pilate, they say, what is truth? If they will but remember that the higher principles deal with the good of the group and the lower with the good of the individual, mayhap clarity will ensue. And that's certainly, I mean, that's simple. There's a sentence that basically explains it all. But living it in a collective group is a little more difficult. The lower activity of personal life, no matter how good or how worthy, must eventually be transcended by the higher love life that seeks the good of the group and not the unit. All that tends to synthesis and divine expression in collections of units is approaching closer to the ideal and approximating the higher principles. In thinking out these ideas may come some helpfulness. You have an illustration of what I say in the fact that many of the struggles that arise in organizations are based on the fact that some worthy people follow personalities, sacrificing themselves for a principle, yes, but a principle governing the personality life. And that's when you have to think about a little bit. So, I mean, there are some worthy people who follow personalities, sacrificing themselves for a principle. Yes, but a principle governing the personality life. So in other words, they are following, let's say, okay, well, I want to vote for so-and-so because I like her or whatever. And so whatever she does, that vote gives her, translates their power to her. I'll say her. I mean, we got to have a woman get voted in somehow. So I'll throw it in there. Okay. Now, what that person does, you just gave all your energy to that person. And you're saying, you can act in my stead. So, and then if you find out, if you would find out that that person was not following what your basic principles are, in today's world, I don't think we would really identify with it. We'd just say, well, they went off the rails. We didn't go off the rails. Even though we voted for them and we stood up for them and allowed them to do whatever the hell they wanted to do, we put some airlock between us and them and won't take the responsibility. So others, dimly glimpsing something higher and seeking the good of the groups and not of a person, stumble onto a higher principle, and in doing so bring in the force of the ego. So what they're saying is those higher principles are up in the same realm as your soul. So you stumble up on one and you start to embody that. You think about it. You're working, when you're creating consciousness, you're factoring this in there somewhere. Okay. Then you are functioning at a little higher level. They are working for others and aiming in the helping of their group. When egos and personalities clash, the victory of the higher is sure. Now you better quote that one and put it on your wall. It is the fundamental level of why, even with my mentors way back when, and we always understood inevitably good works out in the long run. Now, that doesn't mean the long run has anything to do with our short lifespan. Okay, but ultimately the system is designed so it will succeed on moving everything up. But again, I mean, you know, like I said, you might be doing a 2-step, and you know, you may or may not be incarnated during a period when we're taking the steps back, or you may be incarnated when we're taking the steps forward, or you might be involved in both. But inevitably what you've got is you have got that monadic energy up there, and that is extremely powerful and magnetic in its own realm, and it is pulling, it's going to pull everything up. Eventually this is going to succeed. That's the inevitability of it. How long it's going to take is I won't say it's anybody's guess, because I'm pretty sure there's more than a guess somewhere along the line, but inevitably that's the design. It's going to happen. In the middle, so it says, when egos and personalities clash, the victory of the higher is sure. The lower principle must give way to the higher. Interestingly enough, Simon had an update yesterday. I don't know if anybody listened to it yet. Evidently nobody.
3/4 of it.
Okay. If you listened carefully, a whole lot of what's said right here was what he was saying. Okay. Woven into all of this is the inevitability of the win. Okay. One is concentrated, so the lower principle gives way. One is concentrated on what seems to him to be of paramount value, the fulfilling of the wish of the personal life, and at this period is only secondarily interested in the good of the many, though he may have moments when he thinks that is his primary intent. The other cares not for what becomes of the personal self and is only interested in the helping of the many. It boils down, to use an apt expression, to the question of selfish or unselfish motive. And as you know, motives vary as time speeds by and man nears the goal of the probationary path. Still higher principles are those comprehended by the spirit and are only readily comprehended by the monadic consciousness. So make notation, because you're probably not going to personally be able to experience this, but remember what it said. I mean, you're not going to be doing this tomorrow. Still higher principles are those comprehended by the spirit and are only readily comprehended by the monadic consciousness. So that's the guy way up on the top. Only as the man transcends his active personal life, substitutes the life of love or wisdom as led by the ego, can he begin to understand the scope of that life of love and know it as demonstrated power. there's an interesting shift there, because it's a matter of being able to understand it's one thing and then know it as demonstrated power. In other words, that it has functionality is another. Just as the personality deals with the principles governing the life of activity in the lower self, the ego works with the law of love as demonstrated in group work, or love showing itself in the synthesis of the many into the few. And that and that one is really talking about the spiritual triad and the hierarchies. So the monad deals with the active life of love shown in power through the synthesis of the few into the one. And that is talking about monadic energy. And those three things here are three different levels on that chart. They aren't just words. Okay. And basically what he's indicating is that monadic way up on the top, where you start with the one, then deals with the active life of love shown in power through the synthesis of the few into the one. That's your 3 in 1, but in a different way. One deals with the life of man on the physical plane or in the 3 worlds. The second with his life on causal levels, meaning the ego or the soul, however, and the last with his life after attainment of the goal of present human endeavor. Okay. And present human endeavor is basically all of that. One deals with units, another with groups, and the last with unity. One deals with differentiation at its most diverse point. The second with the many resolved into egoic groups, whilst the third sees the differentiation resolved back into the 7, which marks unity for the human hierarchy. So all these factors and many others produce differences among human beings, and in sizing himself up, a man must needs bring them into his consideration. Be borne in mind that a disciple of any of the masters will have his peculiar equipment, his individual assets, and his deficiencies. He can nevertheless rest assured that until the path of knowledge has been added to the path of love, he can never take the major initiations, for these are undergone on the higher levels of the mental plane. Until the path of light is united to the path of life, the great transition from the 4th into the 5th kingdom cannot be taken. Certain expansions of consciousness are possible. Initiations on the astral and the lower mental planes can be taken. So make a note there that there's the major initiations, but there's also a lot of little ones along the way. And he's talking here in plurals. So in other words, certain expansions of consciousness are possible, and that is what an initiation is an expansion. It says initiations on the astral and the lower mental planes can be taken, and he's talking plural. There's a lot of little steps before you get to accomplishing the big step that defines an entire plane. Some of the vision can be seen, the sense of the presence can be felt, the beloved can be reached by love, and the bliss and the joy of this contact can carry with it its abiding joy. But that clear perception which comes from the experience undergone on the Mount of Illumination is a different thing to the joy experienced on the Mount of Blessing. The heart leads in one, the head leads in the other. To answer categorically, the path of knowledge is that of the occultist and the sage. That of love is that of the mystic and the saint. The head or the heart approach is not dependent upon the ray, for both ways must be known. The mystic becomes the occultist, and the white occultist has been the saintly mystic. So look at the order there, because he has really stated the order. In other words, the mystic functions on the astral level. And there was a point at time when the mental level really wasn't functioning yet. And so, and the astral level had to be built. The consciousness in it had to be built. It was built by humanity. And so then the path of love, because that astral plane was meant to be there to have a full direct reflection of the Buddhic plane, which was pure reason, which is pure love. And that was the meant, it was meant. And you had the reflection of that upper level coming to the Buddhic plane, the monadic to the Buddhic plane, and then that pure love was supposed to be reflected on the astral plane, if all had gone well. Okay, well, we have lots of other stuff on that astral plane. You know, that has been a realm of all possibilities, is what that's turned into. That's why I keep saying 2 and 2 equals 4 on the mental plane. It could equal 9 on the astral plane, because anything's possible there. In terms of the kind of energy we have, can be ideologically or emotionally morphed into whatever one desires, at least in your imagination, and sometimes in reality. So, but you had to develop the astral plane before you can get to the mental plane. So what's really saying here is that the path of love is of the mystic and the saint, and you got that development when all of that was being evolved, all the way up through. I mean, we've got some saints that did some pretty beautiful works, if you will, and are to be emulated in the realm of emotion, because they've built their pathway in the direction of seeking God, and they've laid it down. And the mystic, when it comes to spirituality, was doing the same thing. You know, you didn't have to be in a monastery, didn't have to be in a church, but it was seeking that in the astral plane, and those were developed. And then comes the mental plane. So it's saying really here, the path of knowledge is that of the occultist and the sage. In other words, they're already functioning on the mental plane. That of love is of the mystic and the saint. The head or the heart approach is not dependent upon the ray, for both ways must be known. The mystic must become the occultist, and the white occultist has been the saintly mystic. So in other words, the mysticism came first, but now that mystic has to go become the occultist. He has to know both the emotional nature and the mental nature. You don't get to bypass the mental. That was an argument, I think I've said it before. They used to have arguments earlier, these groups that studied stuff about, oh no, you don't have to go to the mental plane. You can just go right straight up from the astral to the Buddhic plane, and then you're into the spiritual triad, and you just keep going. Forget the mental, you don't need it. Well, he's saying that is not true. You have to have both. You have to go up all of these levels. You've got to go. You did 7, you've done the astral, you've got to do 5, the mental plane, and then to be able to function on 4, which is your entry point where you're doing your work, then you interact and you get your downloads from what's above you. When humanity sits on 4, that's where he goes. True knowledge is intelligent love, for it is the blending of the intellect and devotion. Unity is sensed in the heart. Its intelligent application to life has to be worked out through knowledge. It is of prime value to recognize the tendency of the life purpose and to know whether the head or the heart method is the objective of any specific life. A fine spiritual discrimination is needed here, however, lest the glamour of illusion tempt to the path of inertia. Ponder these words with care and see that the question is based on a true foundation, does not grow out of an inferiority complex, the consideration of a brother's enterprise and consequent jealousy tendency, or on a placid complacity which negates activity. In other words, he mentions these things elsewhere at times. In other words, you can have a fake inferiority complex. Oh, I wouldn't be qualified to do that now, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and so that lets you off the hook. Or consideration of a brother's enterprise and consequent jealousy. I mean, I think you saw probably that, a lot of that in the Theosophical Society originally. That's why they all want to climb up and be ranked. And that's why people are always looking, well, where am I? Where am I on this? Where am I on that? Have I got here? Have I got there? Because innately behind that is a sense of competition with somebody else, I guess, whoever they got in their head as a competing factor that I got to get there before they do, or my status has to be higher. Or just one that just says, well, you know, I've seen a lot of this placid complacity. They realize, they read the damn stuff and don't do a thing about it. 40 years and they're still where they probably the first time they read it. Okay. So all of those have an electromagnetic pattern that's working there. One is, you know, the competitive one. There's another one that just isn't connecting anything, any of the wiring. Okay. It's just, it'll sit there and oh, isn't this beautiful? And isn't that a nice idea? But don't have nothing to me, even though I'm sitting here reading these books for all these years. I'm not going to apply this other than I'm going to be a good person kind of thing. And then the inferiority complex, which lets you off the hook on another way. It's a false sense of an evaluation of yourself. Oh, I wouldn't be qualified to do that in this life. Yeah, they're all out there. They've used this material. Hopefully we have some incarnated people now who are a little more dynamic, but certainly when this book was written, they were out for all of those levels. Rather than just sitting there being listening to this, if you open yourself to just the being and having the consciousness to know the pathway is there, and wouldn't it be nice if it comes my way? I'm certainly going to be set up to receive it if it does. I don't know if it's going to happen in this lifetime or not, but all of me would certainly entertain it, and it would be nice if it comes. If not, then I know whatever I've done this time will set me up to continue in the next incarnation without all of the roadblocks that these 3 sentences set up, because that's what they did for these people. One said, well, no, I wouldn't be qualified to be able to do that, you know. Another one is just trying to, jealousy has its own, well, let me save those off, I want to get there first. Or a complacity, which just your wiring isn't hooked up, you know. All of those were ways that he's pointing out that you stop yourself. That's why we went through harmlessness the other day, I believe, you know, and he said, if you just are harmless in terms of you don't build those thought patterns or forms about anything that blocks. You're the most open you could possibly be to receiving. As a general rule for the average aspirant to discipleship, it may be safely assumed that the past has seen much application of the heart way, and that in this incarnation, the mental unfoldment is of prime importance. Can't stress that enough. This is what he's saying. You've got, this one is designed to get you onto the mental plane, because if you can't get on the mental plane, you can't get into the soul. So here is, this will be an ancient scripture because he's talking about the twice blessed one. Seek not, O twice blessed one, to attain the spiritual essence before the mind absorbs. Not thus is wisdom sought. Only he who hath the mind in leash and seeth the world as in a mirror can be safely trusted with the inner senses. Only he who knoweth the five senses to be illusion, and that naught remaineth save the two ahead, can be admitted into the secret of the cruciform transposed. The path that is trodden by the server is the path of fire that passeth through his heart and leadeth to the head. It is not on the path of pleasure, nor on the path of pain that liberation may be taken, nor that wisdom cometh. It is by the transcendent of the two, by the blending of pain with pleasure, that the goal is reached, and that goal that lieth ahead, like a point of light seen in the darkness of a winter's night. That point of light may be called to the mind the tiny candle in some attic drear. But as the path that leadeth to that light is trodden through the blending of the pairs of opposites, that pinpoint cold and flickering groweth with steady radiance until the warm light of some blazing lamp cometh to mind of the wanderer by the way. Pass on, O pilgrim, with steady perseverance. No candle is there, nor earth lamp fed with oil. Ever the radiance groweth till the path ends with a blaze of glory, and the wanderer through the night becomes the child of the sun and entereth within the portals of that radiant orb. Oh, comments, guys.
Those last 3 pages were pretty chock full of information.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and he's basically saying you've got to be up on that mental plane, which for today's world makes it a little easier to understand with some of the science we have now that substantiates the stuff that your mystical path had the information of, but now you get the hard science of it, so you can find the structure, and that structure will basically reside most of it on the mental plane. Yeah, and your sight and your reading of light, you know, and the processing through the nervous system, all of that, the science for all that's there now. Those extra books pretty much lay all that out to you. You know from Lipton that you've got a receiver and a sender on every cell membrane in your body, that you're hooked up, you're wired, you're plugged into this system. It's just you got to activate all the different levels of systems and get them all connected. It's awfully quiet out there.
Gotta let everything go too, it sounds like.
I say that again.
I said, it sounds like we have to let everything go too.
You got to let everything go down here if you want to move there.
Right, that's what I meant.
But I mean, it doesn't mean that they disappear out of your life. But you're not grasping them.
The perspective needs to change.
They're here as long as they're here.
Yeah, because we talked about that thing earlier. I think it was page 118, I think, with the egos and personalities clashing.
Right.
And where did it go?
Close to the bottom.
Yeah, I saw that, but it was before that, I think. I just got thinking, like, in terms of people looking at, man, where did it go?
Or do you want
Worthy people follow personalities, sacrificing themselves for a principle. That kind of made me think of government service. And even in military service, we kind of give up our own personalities to pursue kind of the ego of somebody else, right? Whatever it is we're pursuing for the quote unquote greater good.
if you're actually able to sign on with somebody who is honorable to ultimately the greater good. But the bottom line is that whole body functions in this lower three realms, and it's all tied to what's in it for me.
Right.
This or that got set up, and those may or may not be honorable ideologies.
Exactly.
And you just sold yourself out to them.
Right. And that's where I was going with it. It's like, you know, you sign up thinking you're doing good things, but are you really? Is it really? Because we're pursuing something for the benefit of essentially someone else's outlook. And the question is that person's outlook that you're doing all this service for the right outlook?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely no question that you're right. And so, and in today's world at the moment, I think we're finding out that a lot of those outlooks, which were marketed very well and everybody believed them, may have had other nefarious stuff going on behind the scenes that what new.
Yeah, gives you a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
stormtroopers in Star Wars, like finally realizing that they're the bad guys.
Right.
Yeah. So be that the case, then they have to look within their own heart to examine the essence of what they did and why they did it. Okay. If you find out that you're the bad guy and then you love it, and by that I mean that it makes it even more fun to chop these people up and butcher, blah blah blah. That's one thing, but it's all within the truth of your own motive, your own emotional feelings, and what you relish or don't relish, if you will. I don't know why they say that. And then they have this cucumber stuff chopped up with pickles for relish. I don't know what they have to do with each other, but they're the same word. Yeah. So then it's a matter of, if you become aware of something like that, then that's the inner evaluation.
That could be a tough nut to crack in terms of what if you find out what you are or have been supporting your entire career or whatever might not be the right path, and you're caught up in a conundrum. It's like, okay, so what do I do now? Because I got to take care of things in this physical world. I've got to pay to keep a roof over the head and food on the table. But
yep.
Is the cause that you're working for really gonna?
Am I willing to say not is the question.
Right.
Think of it as like a service to humanity. You're not even your service to your job or
Is it just me or is Frank breaking up?
Oh, but maybe you guys
You can even say what you're saying right now. Once you have a certain understanding of.
Hey, Franco,
You're
you're
breaking
breaking
up,
up.
Franco.
Okay, it wasn't just me. I thought it was just me.
He's breaking.
I think we lost Frank.
Well,
My
he's
thought
on.
is that's probably gonna, and I don't know, but my thought is it's a nag, there's a nagging there even still, probably.
Hmm.
But I would come back to where your heart was. Okay. I mean, you can excuse yourself your ignorance. Now, if you learned about it and then relish the endeavor,
Right.
different.
Yeah, but what I think what Tom's talking about is a lot of the people we know work for
Black hats.
yeah.
I know.
So, what are they? I don't know. That's a tough.
Yeah.
And whether they know that they are or they're not, you know.
You're still. Everybody's still sincere and all in their endeavor. That doesn't change.
Right.
You're.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, like you said, I mean, at one point you had a conversation and you said, well, we were bound to service anyway. That's why we went in the militaries, because we wanted to serve. So a whole lot of you guys already have a concept of service and you want to dedicate your life in that direction. And so, but now the question is, and I would think part of the question is, I mean, if you're out there and you, and I understand emotions and you've all been pitched to supposedly hate the other guy. There's obviously some problem with the other guy that why he shouldn't have. So then it's, okay, well, do I take great pleasure in nailing these people? Or do I do it because this is my job and I'm doing this for my country? Or do I, in a case of an individual or something, take a personal pleasure in just torturing the living daylights out of them, or looking them in the eye and shooting them in the head and letting them know it comes? In other words, there's all of that, which is inner heart stuff that an individual has to evaluate. And then you go from there in terms of putting that either to rest or to examine it to the point where you can see it for whatever it really is and be willing to face it and then determine what you're going to do about it. I mean, there's always redemption.
But there's not a lot of careers left out there right now that are not working for
Somebody.
That's because it's the whole dang thing is owned by the,
Well, it's like it's at this micro level too. So Carla, you brought up a good point with, so we did, the three of us, Donnie, Bull, and myself, we joined the military because something in our heart told us we needed to serve. But we're really not serving necessarily that higher purpose. We're not. We're serving the will of this country. And you brought up, well, so would we, do what's needed to be done for the will of this country and this stuff is shoved down our throat about the people that we're fighting against are bad. Well, yeah, they do bad stuff, but guess what? They're getting the same lecture from whoever's telling them to go out and fight us. So it's like, who's right, who's wrong, but none of us are really serving the higher purpose.
No, you're serving it here.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, that's but I understand that. I mean, I had somebody to me one day say, I never knew who the black hats were and who the white hats were. Okay. And I said, well, let me put it this way. You're working for the Black Hats. It was that simple. I didn't get a response. And I wasn't looking for one. I didn't need an argument. I wasn't looking at that. You just asked me who's who, and I'm just telling you right where you are. But I know that you're there because there's money, there's a recognition, there's, you know, whatever. And so those are choices you make, you know, and that's just the way I look at that, is you decide what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And
You know, I think, man, if I could just say something, I think, you know, because I hear this a lot now, because everybody kind of woke up and is realizing where, you know, that I get my money from them too. You know what I mean? So it's not like I'm going to go give it back, you know. But I think the thing is to start making the plans to, you know, and working on the other service potentially. You know, which we already are, working with the, you know, doing this and pulling the foundation together and trying to, you know, spread the word and stuff. So we all got bamboozled.
Yeah, but it's hard work to get those people aimed to where we need to go. You know, because you drop little hints here and there, and you can really kind of test where people's heads are at and whether or not they're actively working internally to move up like we're trying to do, or if they're just truly stuck down here and earthbound. And I have an example the other day, like we're talking right here, like I've mentioned something to somebody on Facebook as a comment just about how they were fortunate to be able to retire and not have to deal with this anymore because I can't go to work with a straight face anymore, right? And they came back with, well, you could always move out here and go work for the NSA. And I'm like, dude, you're completely missing my point. Completely missed my point. It's not, it's like all of this is limiting to what we're supposed to be doing. So
yeah, let me throw this out, because what you guys are actually doing right now, okay, is the greatest thing you could be doing right now. Is you personally, what you're going to take out of this life is the growth and development you personally have. That's the only thing you're going to take. You can't take the rest of it with you, but what you're doing right now is where the value is. That's priceless, period. Okay. So your own, look, we're only, what, meeting for a year at the most? Something like that. I mean, look at the changes in a year. And that ripples out far more than you realize.
Well, the interesting, what I was thinking about as we were listening to that, because that phrase, the mystic must become the occultist, when we first started talking about this material, that really hit me pretty hard, because I recognized that I was absolutely a mystic.
So did I.
You know, yeah, I know you did. And that stuck with me very hard. But then it's like, you know, there's a lot of comfort in that. There was a lot of comfort in the, you know, in mysticism. It's all lovey and like bright and shiny and
eider down quilt. I mean, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, it is. But, you know, and then making the move over, it is a letting go. And then it is quite, it's different, I'd say. It's quite, I see that, because I can see that the gap between the two, and then It's a lot more quiet.
Well, you got a little burn too. It
Yeah.
fried some of that section, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. But that was a necessary, I
Transition.
assume that's a necessary, yeah. So,
Oh, and there's a lot of that out there, to be honest with you. I mean, that's, well, like he says, the most difficult part is getting out of the astral plane because it's where most of humanity is focused right now. So most of your interactions function on that level because that's how, you know, that's how humanity is
it's comfortable. It is like that down comforter.
Yeah. And I can see where it get really, really easy to get stuck there because it is comfortable and you have some crazy, awesome experiences sometimes if that happens to you. And it's like, you feel good, right? You want to stay there. But the real work is you got to keep moving forward. You can't get stuck because it never ends. You got to keep going. And I just think that there's, why we see a lot of people now that are waking up and they're getting stuck there because they think that's what it is, was because they haven't been exposed necessarily to this material and they don't really know what's to know. And I think that's the importance of, and the greatness of what we're doing here too, is, getting this stuff out there so that people can understand that you don't want to limit yourself. You got to keep moving, because the point is, I think we're supposed to get all of humanity to this point, right? It's some eons down the road or something like that. And we're not going to get there if we've got a subgroup of people that keep getting stuck in the astral plane, so to speak. So.
yeah. But the biggest thing, first of all, is pulling yourself out. Because if you look at Christ, one of the words he said, if I go up, I will bring you up with me. In other words, and that's the way this also works. Okay. Because at some point the astral plane wasn't around and they were just stuck in a mental. Okay. So I'm coming right back to the same thing. The best thing you can do is your own personal development at this point in time, because it will bring others up. And part of getting out of that astral is to focus on some of those side books that are scientific, because that brings you up onto the mental plane. Okay. Starts putting your mind there, and you start to understand that it's so important to understand the unit you have and what all its parts and pieces are and what its potential is and what it can do. Because when you become aware of that, then you start to look at your moving around differently. Literally, you're walking, your presence, where you are, what you're doing, and where your consciousness is residing and at any given point in time, because you have the capacity then to really appreciate and understand the responsibility you have having one of these, of which we've really never valued. We try to keep it in reasonable health so we can live long, so we can party longer, literally, have a good life, so on and so forth. But we really have never really focused on the piece of equipment we have, what it's meant to do, what we are meant to how we're meant to be operating and functioning for the benefit of the planet, of which we are part and parcel. So just personal development is a good enough start, because it will bring others. Bull,
Yes.
okay, I haven't heard from you for a little bit.
Well, Oh, we've been talking.
Yeah,
I've been listening.
yeah, we know you've been listening. We haven't heard from you. So we're not going to hear from you?
I don't know. I'm thinking about what Tom had said about the about working for, you know, the black hats, you know, whatever it is. And then you had made the comment, you know, it's like all those internal things of how people were doing things. Like, I didn't really have any problem going after the bad guys, you know, especially after what they would do to animals, women, children, that kind of stuff. So I felt like I was doing the world a favor getting rid of that, you know, that stuff. It's like, oh, you need the reboot, go, you know.
Yeah, and I'm not,
I certainly didn't have a problem doing the job when during those times when I was in the jobs at all
Yeah.
either. I enjoyed the job. I felt like that too. As a matter of fact, my thought right before I had gotten in my accident, I was like, well, if I don't do this, who the hell else is gonna?
Right.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was a lot of our guys' take on it. It was like, somebody's got to do this. Who's who else is gonna?
Yeah.
So
But
and I'm
I,
not
you know,
that there was anything wrong. You guys are talking about it, and I'm just saying it resides with what's in your heart. But anyway, go ahead, Bill. I
Oh.
interrupt.
I would say, you know, they weren't good people that we were going after, you know, and I think that actually kind of motivated a lot of the teams, a lot of the guys, you know, to clear those pieces off the chessboard, you know, so that maybe the village or the villagers would have a better, you know, kind of way ahead. So, yeah. But, and then, you know, especially, I mean, it's after you see, you know, what humanity is capable of and they're like in their worst, or you're just like, wow, how could someone even think about that, you know? Or even past the point of a thought to actually, you know, do that to a kid, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of,
yeah, it's a very archaic type of thing. It was a lot about like the way Carla was talking about earlier about the cultures and how they own what, you know, their family members and whoever, you know, they have that power thing. It was very archaic type scenario.
yeah. But it's like, even, you know, being over there doing, you know, the job, stuff like that. It's, you know, for the higher intention, for the, you know, like whatever the black hatted, you know, end was, or, you know, the end game was, I think there was a lot of, you know, making lemonade out of lemons, things happening, some silver lining, whatever, you know, like you want to call it there.
Yeah, there was a distinct point in time where I think we all kind of realized that too, you know, like, all
Well,
right,
and then,
yeah, for sure.
you know, when things started slipping, when, you know, like we would report back and they're like, oh no, just ignore all the pedo stuff, you know? And they're like, wait, what? No, that's not, you know, like we're supposed to be the good guys. We can't ignore that stuff. That's supposed to be like, you know, like the hero vanquishes the evil, you know what I mean? Like we can't just like, oh, well, that evil's okay, that evil's not okay. Okay. You know what I mean? It's like, if it's bad, it's bad. If the guy's bad, he's bad, you know?
So I think you recognize that in your heart, Bull, and that makes it, I think, better in terms for you.
Well, but I think that's kind of when I started to realize that, you know, strange things were afoot at the Circle K, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Necessary, I guess, right? We got to see all different cultures and levels of evolution. It's very distinctive.
Yeah, if they ever wanted to reboot, you know, 10 Commandments or something like that, they would never have to build a set. Just go over there and, yeah, everything, yeah, everybody's in costume. Everybody still has that same very ancient, you know, way of doing things.
Yeah, and you know, it's not that long ago that still a fair amount of that existed in this country, because human rights came in with Carter in the late 70s, 76 to 80. Children's rights, giving children actual rights, came in after that in this country. There wasn't a body of law that protected children. And now I'm not talking about pedophiles or anything like that. I'm just talking about from their parents. And, you know, I'm sure you still see some that have got the cigarette burns all over and stuff like that. But the parent had the right to discipline the child in any way, possible. Now you can't beat them to near death because you're trying to make a point, you know, but that protection, I mean, hasn't been there that long, even in this country, because it was a religious right that was granted to the father.
Somebody told me one time when I was talking to them about evil, and I think it was probably you, Carla, and because I don't get my information from, but you had said, I said something about evil people, and you said, why are you worried about it? They're all going to die anyway.
No,
Yeah.
I'm the one who said that, you know.
Well, we're gonna, you know, when they die, their evil's gonna go with it, and then they're gonna deal with it, you know. So somebody had said that.
I think it was somebody else. I don't really look at them quite that way.
It might have been HPB or DK somewhere in there. Don't worry about evil people. They're gonna expire. Their time is gonna come up, and then they'll be gone.
Yeah, except, yeah, I wouldn't have said that simply because what we're really talking about is just their mindset or their emotion set, however you want to look at it. And that isn't a matter of them being gone because they're going to reincarnate. So you're more, I mean, from my viewpoint, I'm more interested in the evolution of humanity, each individual moving up a little bit. Because you get, I mean, like he says here, you have a group, okay? So a group will come back and incarnate to solve some of its problems. It comes back in group, you know, the Hatfields and McCoys, so to speak. They come to play it out again to try to mellow it out. So dying is no solution to evil.
Yeah, so were we really helping anything? Is, you know, what, when we're taking them out of the equation in the midst of evil, say, or in the midst of old patterns, or, was there any good in that? Or is that not necessarily the answer? Should they, that's what I'm saying. Like, do you let them play it out and grow from it, from their mistakes?
Well, I would think that there can get to be too much of an upper hand, in a sense, occur. Okay, if you just ignore it. But I mean, it'd be very nice if the ideologies could just evolve in those individuals or groups, or what he's talking about here when they come down here. I think that's part of what they're hoping, is that they come back into another environment where there's another way to do things, or there's some level of mental capacity or something that's been built in that wasn't there in the previous time that they existed. No, ultimately, if you can work out those problems and synthesize them, if you will, come to a solution, that would be your optimum if it was real and it was genuine. Okay.
Yeah, we have said that for years. Yep.
Yeah. But
well, that's what training them is about a lot of times, in ideologies and such.
Except what, when we went back to our starting, and that a lot of those altercations were designed for some other purpose that had nothing to do with those people. They just happen to be in the way. That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. I think that education is be the preferred answer, right? That'd be the best case.
But sometimes we can do that, and sometimes it doesn't happen. But part of that probably has to do with leadership. So, and now talking about heads of state, and I'm talking about the people who have other purposes but are in the positions that direct you guys' actions. Okay.
Yeah, I think we know about how that goes. Yeah. My thought is, what I was thinking about is the a lot of the cultures that we saw firsthand, there was a lot of inbreeding. So there was probably a lot of, I don't know what the implications of that and all are, but their cultures were very stuck in some pretty ugly ways. There was a lot of, it's just kind of I'm just kind of looking at that and going, well, how does that evolve from where it's at right now? That's maybe maybe, there is a big benefit, probably, I'm sure, to us being there and then kind of helping them along. So not to say it was, war is the answer. I'm not saying that, but our presence being there may be some of the answer.
But now at the moment, the better answer is what you guys are going through and your evolution, because I'm going to come right back to this. This is what you take with you. This is basically, you have the potential for this to be a permanent change. So in any given incarnation coming up after this, you do not lose this mindset, this focus, this experience. It's part of you. That's what you do take with you. You get to keep. And you can probably reap a lot of positive good into your surrounding environments with whatever the remainder of your life is. And that ripples out. So that's the biggest place to focus at this point in time.
Yeah, very wild. But very, from an evolutionary standpoint, very, very wild, whole thing.
What are we, 9? Is that 8 or 9? Is that 9?
Yeah,
Are we-
we're about done.
Okay. And we finished. Did we get to the
Rule 3.
end of rule 3?
Yeah.
So. So next week we'll go back over rule 1. And have some discussion related to it when we look at it.
And so, but you know, we even talked about it in rule 3, where the brothers allow, you know, these things happen because of them. And then even when something negative, you know, it does happen, it's still the good is pulled out of that, and good inevitably comes out of it anyway.
Yes, but the question that I think is being asked here at some point is, how do you resolve that within yourself?
Yeah, well, you gotta let go.
That, do I feel some of that when you were talking?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think it's more of a personal battle than worrying so
Yeah.
much about, because you know, it's something that I do struggle with. I work for the government, so it's like, what am I doing, and who am I really doing it for? Because you know, we're really working for lobbyists. If you think about it, you break it down, and who are they working for? So, but yeah, I think it's for me, it's more personal and kind of where I struggle and how I'm working to kind of manage and sift my way through that.
Right. So even though, Donnie, it might be the guys at the top here who are going to let the dice fly. It's each individual, how he handles it internally, that is ultimately how the impact is felt. You know, you can look at it as a grandiose adventure and blame the country or whatever, but it always comes back down to the individual also, because you got consciousness. You know, you're running your evaluators, you're evaluating what this is and what that is, and how does it play with you, and how does this impact, and what responsibility do you have for it, blah, blah, blah. And there's no saying everybody should have the same same result or in ideology. You've all got different souls, different backgrounds, different, histories, if you will, collectively within yourself to play it off of. So the intent of the incarnation itself may very well have had different objectives for all three of you.
But we're all working out some karma together, right?
Yeah, we're all vibrating at the same thing till we found each other.
Yeah.
Stayed together throughout all the time.
Yeah, roll 3 was chock full of all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
We had
all
our-
the questions that we had we could answer inside of the rule we just read. All the questions we had.
But for every answer or for every question we get answered, don't we generate like 7 more questions?
So are we wrapping this one up today?
Yeah, we'll do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna shut recording off.